All right, guys, some midweek thoughts coming off the Notre Dame game, a few days to digest, going into the week 2 matchup versus McNeese. You read the title to the video, and maybe the idea of adjusting expectations on a season after one game, or even having expectations at all, is not something that you want any part in. But there's been enough chatter amongst Aggies to make me want to address it. So should we adjust expectations on Texas A&M's 2024 football season? In short, not yet. But now that we know what areas of the team and storylines we're going to be looking out for, we have to follow this stuff week to week to really understand the long-term trajectory of a football team. And on expectations, look, I know you might not consciously put expectations on a team, but everybody has a basis for thought regarding a football team, a basis for comparison. In your mind, going into the year, maybe this is around an 8-win team. Maybe some of the optimists are like, oh, this team can win 10. You have a preconceived notion. Has that changed? And like I said, it's too early to fully tell. But I want to talk about what the emerging strengths, weaknesses, and storylines we need to see develop are, and kind of explore what the next few weeks might have to look like for Texas A&M to really put a stamp on the year one Mike Elko Aggies. So today, I want to talk about all that stuff related to the next few games at Texas A&M schedule, because if one game doesn't define a season, a stretch of games could. And you have a couple of tough ones coming up, a couple of games that a lot of people might have marked down as question marks or scary situations. I'm talking about the Florida game. I mean, that's a game that's a must-win at this point. So I want to talk about things we need to see develop going into that game, talk about what we've learned, and kind of relate that to expectations on the year. So guys, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. It helps me greatly. I want to keep growing this thing and bring more Aggies into the discussion. Comment your thoughts on expectations. Do you even want to have this discussion? Do you even want to think about that? I understand if you don't. So really, we're going to focus on the team in this video, is what the real bulk of this is going to be about. So guys, let's get right into it. All right, let's start with some feels we got coming out of the Notre Dame game. Now that we've had a couple days to sit on it, digest it, some of y'all have rewatched it. I've watched it a couple times. We're sick freaks like that. You're watching this show. You're probably pretty sick to watch me. So a couple of good feels I have coming out of it. Some things we got verification on or further context. Obviously, we got full context seeing the team play after just, preseason talk. Let's talk some strengths. Secondary. We had a feeling it was going to be much improved coming off of last year, where the corner position specifically was a major weakness. Des Ricks, Will Lee, Javen Thomas. That trio was awesome. They tackled well. Some soft coverage, but you get the feeling that could have been by design, where some of those curls and outs worked. But they were able to bottle everything up, and there was really good run support amongst that trio. And I thought the safeties were awesome. Even Marcus Radcliffe, who had a couple of missed tackles, he was very involved in the running game, very active on the field, very, very willing to come to the line of scrimmage and get physical. You love to see that from a guy who's really taking a huge step up in competition, earning a starting role. That was a surprise to me. I was assuming it was Dalton Brooks or Trey Jones, but no. Marcus Radcliffe was the starter in game one. So those three new starters and that fourth guy in that rotation, Des Ricks was the first one off the bench in that corner room. You feel really, really good about them just improving week to week. And Des Ricks, he got better over the course of that game. Will Lee was one of the better players in that game overall, and I know he had that really big catch on him by Bo Collins in that last drive of the game, but he was right there making a play. It was just a better play by a receiver. You got to take your hat off to that, but I couldn't be more encouraged by the secondary. I think it's going to be an absolute strength of this defense, a stabilizing force of the defense, and something we're going to, hang our hats on over the next few weeks, a position group you're going to lean on. They made a lot of tackles when the linebackers weren't necessarily playing that well, and transitioning into that, I think we need to see improvement from the linebackers, specifically Torian, because we expected a little bit more from him, and he knows that. He talked about it. He addressed it in his post-game presser. He just needs to play a cleaner game. And I'm not just talking physicality-wise. We know he's a smaller linebacker. We know he's not the fastest or the strongest, but we haven't seen him out of position like we did this game previously, and I kind of find relief in the fact that one of your down areas was from a guy that you have seen good from before and so much and so consistently, you feel like there's a big bounce back coming for Torian. So I don't think I leave week one with linebacker being a major concern. I think Scooby played well. He also has some issues in the run fit and maybe not taking the best angles at times, but his athleticism put him in good position several times in that game to make good plays, to where he graded out pretty well, overall. I don't worry about linebackers going forward as much as, say, other positions on the team. So keep an eye on linebackers going forward. Let's see how they progress. It should be a very much a get-right opportunity for everybody on the team, but specifically them this weekend versus McNeese. D-line. Now, coming out of the game, a lot of us felt like it kind of underperformed. It didn't dominate like we were hoping for versus the young offensive line that Notre Dame equipped. But going back and watching it, a couple players really stood out. Shamar Stewart, I think, lived up to the billing. He was the most disruptive D lineman. He was in the backfield. He was, at times, dominating the man blocking him. Really, really strong performance by Shamar Stewart. Nick Scorton had his moments in the game. It wasn't the utter domination on their freshman left tackle like we were hoping for, but he won his share of battles. And keep in mind, he played half of that game, or more than half of that game, nicked up. He left the game for a while with what looked like some sort of knee sprain or knee injury, leg injury at least. We don't know exactly what it was. And he was able to play through that, and, he didn't register a sack. I think there's a world where you could have registered some of his tackles for a sack. I think there was one where he chased Riley Leonard out of bounds right at the line of scrimmage. There was one where he tackled Riley Leonard in the backfield, but he dove forward and the ball got close to the line of scrimmage. That could have been registered as a sack, but it wasn't. I think the defensive ends, including Cassius Howell, who ended up being the highest graded defensive player on the team that game, and Rylan Kennedy, who was the first jack off the bench, that edge rushing third down player. It was Rylan Kennedy first. I think they both showed tremendous potential and just play in this game versus Notre Dame. Like I said, it wasn't dominating performance like we had hoped for, but Notre Dame had a great game plan where they got the ball out of the backfield really quickly or just utilized Riley Leonard's running ability to escape pressure. So it was not as bad as I initially remembered. Interior-wise, I think they left a little bit to be desired. Really like Shamar Turner. I like how he's mean. I like how he's vicious. To me, he kind of gets out of his play a little bit. He gets a little bit more... I think he can get knocked off his axis a little bit with, trash talk and just being a vicious, mean guy out there. And I think that's good to have on a D-line. But I think there's a little bit of just distraction going on there, and I want to see him hone that in. I think he will hone that in. He's a really, really good player. And then the nose, Albert Regis played most of the snaps at nose. You didn't see as much of a rotation there as you might have expected. You saw a little bit of Hicks. You saw like 5 plays of Rodas Johnson. But Regis had up and down moments. There were some encouraging ways that he handled double teams in that game. There were times where double teams couldn't budge him. He was able to clog rushing lanes. Let's see him become more consistent, but I think it's a positive start for Regis after reevaluating. But I want to see some more impact from Shamar Turner, and I think that's another guy that, okay, like Torian, you're like, okay, it wasn't the best, but we've seen more from him before. We think we can get that out of him pretty quickly. So overall with the defense, I don't think my evaluation changes. I don't believe it can be an elite defense. I think it's right there. You had them at 13 points until the last 6 or 3 minutes of the game or something like that. And, you didn't get complimentary football from that offense. So that really kind of makes a defense press. It gets a defense more tired. And, if you have that, maybe you hold them to 13. If the offense is able to stay on the field on some of those third downs where you make a blunder or a false start or you kind of whiff on that offsides attempt, where you're trying to draw them off sides and get the ball out, and you didn't execute on those plays, I think you stay on the field longer and give your defense more of a chance. So you need to see more complimentary football, and most of the problems are going to come on the offensive side of the ball. That's where you're going to need to see answers quickly. And obviously it starts with Connor, and I don't know, how much can you evaluate it? How much can you say? He just has to be better. He just has to be himself. He pressed. He was antsy. He was rushed. We just got to see it be better. And, he took to the podium. You probably expect that from a quarterback, from a leader on the team. He owned it, and he needs to really own it by going out there and just being himself. And I think he will. Keep in mind, Notre Dame, elite defense, best secondary you'll see all year. They were able to do different things because of just the level of players they have against our receivers. Really took us out, put us in disadvantageous positions You won't see that again, and you'll give Connor a chance to find rhythm, get back into his flow. It's been a long time since he's played, and he'll have a chance to do that versus McNeese. Really want to lean on that running attack and that offensive line. So you're talking about the offense, a lot of negatives maybe. One positive development is I think the offense, exceeded expectations if you were measuring how it has been the last few years. It wasn't perfect, but they played well enough to give you a chance to win the game versus a really good defense and a good defensive line. What more can you ask? Compared to last year, compared to the year before, the O-line actually gave you a chance to win the game. Now, pass pro, it wasn't perfect, but it didn't feel like the pocket was constantly falling apart like it has the last couple of years. It felt like Connor had time. And, sometimes Connor's on the clock and you have a blitzer coming, you have to deal with it. And Connor just didn't execute under those conditions. It just didn't happen. I think the O-line will get better week to week as they learn to play together. Keep in mind, that's a new configuration. The only thing you have coming back from last year really is Trey Zune starting at left tackle. Everything else is different. But I think individuals played really well. And I think even, what might be the most highly contested position on that line, which is the right tackle, even Crownover had some good moments in that game. He had some bad as well, but he did have some good run blocks and some good pass pro to go along with it. So they just need to find consistency, come together. And I think that's a great base for an offense, right? While your quarterback kind of tries to find his stride, your receiver room kind of tries to find its stride, your running backs, Le'Veon Moss is stepping into a major role this year, something he hasn't had before. He's becoming a go-to guy, a down-to-down guy, a gamer. You have an O-line to stabilize that. That feels pretty good. That feels pretty positive when it comes to finding yourself as an offense. They have to find an identity. They have to find a flow. Keep leaning on Le'Veon Moss. Use Amari. Use EJ as your change of pace. But Le'Veon's clearly the guy. They clearly want him to be the guy. They feel like he's a playmaker. They feel like he can do things in open field by himself. He can make people miss. They used him as a receiver. They split him out wide. They put him in motion. They're going to use Le'Veon a lot, and we're going to lean on Le'Veon Moss a lot, and I think he's fully capable of it. Player I've been high on, player you've probably been high on, player Jimbo was high on. Yeah, it's Le'Veon Moss time. He's the bell cow. He's running back one. Lean on him. Receivers, a lot of talk about separation. Yeah, they didn't get perfect separation that game, but again, amazing secondary. They're just able to man up, play tight, and do their job. But there were opportunities that Connor just didn't find out there for sure. And receivers have to play a little bit better too. There were plays where they didn't get aligned right. There were plays where they didn't know the plays. They got to fix that stuff. Control what you can control at the very least, and then just get better and more consistent. I think the receiver room, I still, at this point, think the receiver room has a chance to be good, but we have to see it. Take the layup. Play really well versus McNeese. And let's get into that. Oh, let's talk about tight ends real quick. One of my concerns going forward, I would say, is tight end blocking before Donovan, comes into flow. I have a feeling we won't see Donovan until later in the year if we see him this year. Trey Watson, really good receiving tight end, serviceable blocker, but I don't know if he's a go-to blocker build. Time remains to be seen there, but there were some pulls, there were some split zone blocks where he kind of got out-physicaled by linebackers. Let's see how he handles that going forward, because I think it's on tape now. He knows that was an issue last game. Let's see how that develops, because, Theo is still learning. Theo is still coming into his own, has the physicality, has the size, has the measurables, but he's not consistent yet. I think Trey Watson's the one you lean on. So let's look for him to increase those blocking chops and become that safety valve that you really need him to become. It was there early in the game. He had that huge reception on the opening drive. We need to see more of that. We need to see more sound blocking. Keep an eye on the tight end room. But relating that all into game 2 of the year versus McNeese, I mean, what can you learn versus a team like McNeese? You can learn how a team handles a loss. I mean, you can go out there and be sluggish and not, hit the ground running versus McNeese, especially with a noon kickoff, especially with probably a more dulled crowd compared to what you just went through week 1. You're going to have to go out there and just show that you're ready for football and just show that you're ready to take that next page. You got to turn the page and just be clean and be yourself and start early and often. I want to see the team, I'm going to say the word, guys, execute early in the game, play really well early in the game. I want to see Connor just set his feet and just be solid. Just be great. Just be good. Be yourself. What else is there to say? Play better, Connor. Play better. I want to see the O-line dominate this game, because it's a game that they can dominate after having success versus a really good D-line. This is a chance to be dominant versus an FCS opponent. You got to do that if you're the O-line. Receivers, they should be able to win their matchups. If someone lines up man, like you were lined up against the entire game pretty much versus Notre Dame, I want to see you win those matchups more often than not versus McNeese. If you're not winning those versus McNeese, what does that say about the Florida game? What does that say about even Arkansas and, maybe Mississippi State? You got to do it versus McNeese. So keep an eye on those receivers. They should be able to get separation, the word, versus that level of opponent. Defensively, I don't see why McNeese should score more than 2 touchdowns against this defense, and that's including garbage time. Defense needs to go out, remain physical. It was an extremely physical outing defensively versus Notre Dame. They were really good in that department. Just maybe not wrapping up the best, maybe not taking the best angles, but damn it, they were physical and they were passionate in getting after it. I don't want to see that go away or dip versus lesser opponent in a noon game. I want to see that even better because the opportunity is even better. Win the game, but dominate it all around. So that takes us to Florida. If you're going to play Florida at Florida, you got to bring it early and often. There can't be a lull. There can't be a layover. There can't be a hangover from going Notre Dame, lesser opponent, Florida at the Swamp at 2:30. Yeah, Florida looked really bad week 1. They looked very vulnerable. But so did A&M in some regards. So I don't want to see Connor regress into that happy-footed, inaccurate, kind of pressing shell of himself that he was in game 1. You got to use that carryover, gain the rhythm, but don't lose that drive. Don't lose whatever you find versus McNeese. I know these are all just fan words and like buzzwords, and we're talking like we're fans here, but consistency, man. Carry it over week to week. Find it this weekend. Find what you didn't have this weekend. Build on what you had versus Notre Dame and go into Florida and really put a stamp on the season. Because going into the year, now we're talking about expectations again. Going into the year, I did predict Notre Dame was a win and Florida was a loss. But I also said, I think you split those two, whichever way it went. So if you go out and you do what you need to do versus McNeese and you're able to beat Florida on the road and you're able to look good in doing it, it's not a sloppy, performance. You go out there and you play well, you execute, you don't beat yourself in any capacity, then I think we can still feel good about the outlook of the season. I think that Florida game is going to be the tell-all. I don't know if you can get all your answers versus that level of opposition, Notre Dame's defense, in a week 1 under a new staff with a quarterback coming back. I don't know if you get definitive answers from that. But I think by week 3 you will have that. I think you'll know what's to come in the season. And judging it from like a normal perspective, let's say you played New Mexico week 1 and then you played Notre Dame week 2. Well, we'd be saying the same thing after New Mexico. Last year, you had 3 touchdown passes to Noah Thomas versus New Mexico, and then you didn't really see that the rest of the year. But you, on that same token, you had your field goal blocked versus New Mexico, and that came up to bite you several times throughout the year. So you can't always take what you get in week 1 for information that you were absolutely going to see the rest of the year, but some of it can come back up. They need to make sure that more often than not, those negatives are not things that persist throughout the year, and you stamp it out early and you find it early in the season. And this is their opportunity to do so. But all right, guys, like I said, we're not adjusting expectations yet. But by the time Florida's done, we will know what this team is for the most part. And yes, you can improve over the course of a year. But if you've lost 2 early games, your chances of the highest, possible outcome on the season, given what we have and know, kind of change. So you hope for the best. You think they're going to get the best out of them coaching-wise. I still trust fully in Mike Elko and this staff. Let's see them go out there and play an awesome, clean game versus McNeese. This is the video I'm doing in place of my McNeese preview because I don't really think there's too much, fun talking points talking about a matchup versus an FCS opponent. It's about us here. We're talking about the Aggies here. So that's what I made this video about. So guys, thanks for watching. Comment what you think about this next stretch of games. Comment what you want to see. Comment if you agree or disagree with what I have to say. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I'll see you Thursday night. Gig 'em.